Portrait photography is one of those things that, if it's done well, can create images that quite literally can be used for generations. Because, in my opinion, a good portrait photograph really captures something of the essence of the person that you're photographing. However, it's not quite as simple as it might appear, because a good portrait will look pretty straightforward. It looks like, it isn't that difficult, and it's very easy to actually make a mistake. And this was something I did when I first got started with portrait photography. I got caught up a little bit in the technical side, if you like, getting the lighting right, making sure I had the right camera equipment, all that kind of stuff. And the thing that I missed, and this is probably the most important part of portrait photography, it's getting that rapport with the client. Because when someone trusts you and is relaxed with you, you're going to get much better results than if they're a little bit tense, they're not sure what's going on, and that will come through in the photographs. So what I thought I'd do was just talk through really 8 things to think about, whether you're new to portrait photography or perhaps you've been trying portraits for a while, but you're not quite getting the results you were hoping for. Or maybe if you haven't done it for a while and you just want some reminders. So the first thing to remember is that most people don't particularly like having their photograph taken. Now, this might not be as true today as it used to be, because some people take hundreds, thousands of selfies. So from that regard, you've got perhaps a generation of people, and here I'm speaking of someone who grew up in the sort of 60s, 70s, where having your photograph taken, I remember with my father, was a bit of an ordeal, really. And the results at the end were, a picture of me or whoever I was with, and we were right in the middle of the picture, and this tiny little figure, because he liked to have a lot of space around the people. So anyway, what I grew up with was not particularly inviting as a thing to do. However, these days there are a lot more people with smartphones love their selfies. So the chances are that if you're particularly younger people, you're going to find that they're more relaxed. However, having said all of that, there is a good chance that at least one of the people that you're photographing, and it might be a group of people, it might be an individual, or it might be a group of people at an event, say a wedding or some sort of corporate event, whatever it might be. And some of them are likely to be a little bit uncomfortable. So it's really important, first of all, that you get people relaxed. And the best way to do that, I find, is to have the person who's organizing the shoot, or it might be the subject, sit down with them and first of all just get to know them a little bit. So if you're meeting, I used to shoot photographs at people's homes. So what I would do when I turned up, and often I hadn't met them in person before, I would just leave all of my camera gear in the car and go down, sit down with them, have a cup of coffee, and just have a little bit of a chat about what we were going to do, the kind of stuff I had in mind. And that really brings me on to the second point, which is about breaking the ice, and it's about building rapport. So a way of doing that might be, I would chat about certainly what I was planning to do, but the key thing is to find out more about them. So initially, don't talk about the photography session, concentrate more on just building a bit of rapport, which might be about their home, or if you're meeting them in a coffee shop or something like that, then just have a general chat about what's the shoot about. Let's say, for example, if it's an engagement shoot, then you could ask, assuming this is one of the people who's getting engaged, ask how they met, or ask how the couple met. If you're not dealing directly with the one member of the couple, but just start to genuinely listen, and that's a really important thing. But begin to learn more about the client, and as you talk, they'll begin to relax with you. They'll feel more comfortable with you as a human being rather than a photographer, and often you'll find that little things will come out that give you clues about the type of photograph to take. So that will become part of your shoot list. And that's really the next thing. And that will relate to the event. So if it's a wedding or something like that, what I would suggest is that you do a pre-shoot with ideally the couple who are getting married. And there's very good reason for that, and include it in the package price if this is something you're doing commercially. So if you're going to do a wedding, and if you're going to have people, it depends on your style, but some of the best photographs I find are things that are a little bit unexpected, like asking everyone to jump up or whatever else it might be, whatever you choose to do. But if you do that in a pre-shoot with just a couple themselves, and they get them to do this same stuff, what will tend to happen is they'll be a little bit reserved at first. And again, another tip is to do any formal photographs first and then switch to informal afterwards. But once they've gone through the shoot and they've seen the results, they'll be a lot more enthusiastic, because you as a photographer know that you'll know your style and you'll know what kind of results that you like to get, and you'll know how to get them. What you need to do is get buy-in from the people who are essentially driving the shoot, from the client end, get buy-in from them so that they'll get their friends, family to really get involved. And that's far easier to have the bride, groom, whoever else it is, in the case of a wedding, or whoever's organising the shoot, if you're doing anything a little bit unusual, to let them have the experience of it first and get to see the results, and then you'll have them on your side when you do the larger group. So I'm hoping this is making sense. So that's good, because if you're trying to do it all yourself as the photographer, I think it puts a lot of stress on you. It's also much harder to get buy-in from people who've never met you. Some people might have a pathological hatred for that kind of shoot, so they're not likely to be terribly cooperative. So if you can do anything you can do basically to take the pressure off you and allow you to concentrate on just getting the results and obviously deal with the technical side of things, the more of that you can do, the better. So that's the shoot. So coming back to the shoot list, the next thing to do is to ask them if there are any specific photographs they would like. So that becomes the sort of primary shoot list. These are the kind of must-get photographs. And what I would do is I would have a kind of standard shoot list for whether it was a portrait session or a wedding, whatever it was. But I'd have a list of photographs I would normally get, which might be the couple together. I'd do a wide shot, medium shot, close-up. I'd get them to kiss, so there's things you can do to get them to do that. All this sort of thing. So I'd have a list of things. So if you start talking through with your client what they want to have on the other side of the shoot, the result, the particular shots they want, that's really important. And it's really important to make sure you get those shots if you can. And I would add them to the shoot list. So they would be my primaries, and then I would work them into the schedule that I plan to shoot. So obviously if it's something like a wedding, and this is another thing to bear in mind, that there might be a sequence of events. So if that's the case, you need to know all of the timings and where you would need to be. So in the case of a wedding, it might be when the bride's arriving, the groom arriving, obviously guests arriving, all that kind of thing. That will also tell you if you need an assistant, someone just to say, if you're working with the bride getting ready is a good one to do, and just nip down to wherever the wedding is taking place to get a picture of the bride arriving. You can have an assistant just shooting shots of people or other people arriving, because the bride won't have seen those. She won't have seen anybody arriving, so that those are likely to be shots she would want to buy. So it's good to have somebody to help you if you can. So get an idea of what's going on in the event. So if it's a corporate event, it's probably a little bit easier in as much as you possibly have one location, but again, it depends on the event. But if you've got multiples, you'll need to just work out where you need to be and when to get those shots, and then you'll need to have a shoot list for each location. So get that shoot list together, get the sequence together if it's something that is going to be a sequence, and make sure you really understand. And as you're talking through with your client, what I find happens is I'll get ideas as well, or it will just trigger something that I've seen before or that have done before that I hadn't thought of for this particular event. So it's a very good idea to kind of just explore that with your client and just get that shoot list as complete as possible, and just make sure you highlight the kind of must-haves, and then the other ones, maybe a second group of definitely want to get, and then a third group of nice to haves if there's a chance. And the nice to haves might be having an assistant go around just shooting candids, which might be just people chatting, having fun. It might be detailed shots, again, of a piece of clothing or flowers or whatever it might be. But all of these things can be brought together at the end of the shoot, and then you've got quite a nice collection of photographs to work from. Which then basically takes me to the next thing, which is to look at how they want to use those photographs. So are you going to produce a photo book, which would be nice? Do they want to be able to blow images up so they can have a large sort of poster size image on a wall? Are they just for social media? Whatever else they might be doing with it. So the reason is hopefully quite obvious, in that if you're going to be producing results that need to be printed, particularly in reasonable resolution or even high resolution, you need to be shooting the largest possible file sizes you can shoot, and always shoot in RAW. So as a rule, I always shoot big and always shoot RAW. However, if the images are just being used for social media, then you might get away with JPEG, and just even a medium-sized file might be enough. Having said that, of course, that then dictates what equipment you're going to need when you're on the shoot. So are you going to use a DSLR or mirrorless? Can you get away with a smartphone? Because you may well have an assistant walking around with a smartphone, just snapping images. And in some ways, that's really good, because we're so used to seeing people walking around with their phones in their hand, even if they're not taking photographs, they could be just chatting, that at an event, we're probably going to ignore them. So if you have somebody walking around taking candids, it's ideal, I would say, to try and do it on a smartphone rather than on a DSLR. Now, you might want to go around and carry a DSLR or a mirrorless with you, or even a film camera, and shoot your own stuff. But by having the shoot list, by being clear on where you are, what the timings are, where you need to be, who's doing what, and what you want to produce as a final result, you can begin to work in who needs what equipment, where they need to be. Here I'm talking or assuming that you have somebody who can assist. And even if it's someone who's not a professional photographer, or even a particularly good photographer, with a little bit of coaching and guidance, they can still come up with usable pictures. So it's not a major problem, but it's nice to have that selection of photographs at the end of the shoot. So moving on, I guess, to that. So you've built your rapport with your client. You've got a shoot list, the background story. Between you've got a primary shoot list, and then you've got your own shoot list to add to that. And if you don't have one already, I'd suggest just putting one together. There'll be stuff on the web, I'm sure, that will give you suggestions on things to do, or just think through events you've been to and what the key stages are, so that you know what to look for when you're putting that together. Once you've done all of that, obviously be clear on the locations as well as you go through each stage. So how much is indoor, how much is outdoor? So again, all of this comes back to what equipment you need. Now, one photographer that I trained with to do professional portrait and wedding photographs, she would only shoot outside. She wouldn't use flash. And in fact, there's a couple of things there, I guess. One is if it is something like a religious service, like a church service, big tip there, always speak to the person conducting the service beforehand. Just introduce yourself and ask them if there are any particular parts of the service. Well, first of all, ask if it's okay to take photographs inside while the service is going on, because some of them might have strong feelings about that. And this may be something you might need to discuss before the event with whoever's organising the photography. So presumably the bride or the groom, whoever's doing it, or whoever that might be, just to get clear on whether or not photography is allowed, first of all. And if it is allowed, just ask whoever's running the religious side, I guess, of the event, if there are any particular points in the service where they would prefer that you didn't take photographs, because some points are more sensitive, let's say, than others. And obviously, if they do say there are times when it's not appropriate, then absolutely respect that. And perhaps be clear with your client if this is a paid shoot or if you're doing it as a favour for someone. Just let the person organising know that you'll be doing that, and that it might be the case that the person running the event doesn't want you to take pictures at certain points. So and that's all about setting expectations with your client. Okay, so the final thing is to the other thing I was going to say there, I knew there was something else. The person I did my training with, what she would do, most of her stuff was outside. And when you get to the evening event, because normally, this was be a wedding in the afternoon, they might have an evening dinner, something like that. And the groom, the bride, whoever's organising might want pictures of just people at the dinner or having fun or whatever it is. And what she used to do, is this going back to early 2000s, was just buy a bunch of disposable film cameras and leave one on every table, and just have somebody responsible for collecting them all at the end of the meal, at the end of the event. And then she would develop and go through all of those pictures. And people on the tables were just encouraged to just snap pictures. So it was getting the guests to just take all of these pictures. So you never know what you're going to get in that situation. But when you are trying to work as a photographer at a dinner like that inside, where the lighting may not be great, you don't know what people are doing, you don't have a lot of control over it, it might be quite difficult to produce some good quality results. So again, make that clear to the person who is running the shoot, organising the shoot with you. And again, it sets expectations, and they might like the idea of it. Another option is to get people to just take smartphone pictures and upload any to a web page. So you could set something up if you have a website, or it's easy enough to set up something like a shared drive somewhere, maybe on Google or somewhere else, and just have a folder and make it accessible for people at the wedding to upload pictures from their smartphone for maybe a period of a week or so after the wedding, depending on when you need to produce final results. That's just another way of adding in these kind of candids, these random photographs, which they also tell part of the story. And really what's sitting behind all of this is that you're telling the story of that event. Or if it is an individual person, in terms of location, something to think about is where you're going to take photographs of them. And an example I give on webinars is to talk about somebody who's a boat builder, for example. And you might choose to photograph them in front of their computer. If they're designing boats, you might want to photograph them in a workshop where these boats are being built, or you might want to shoot them in a marina. So you've got those backgrounds, which also provide a setting that tells the story. Or you might want to do all of those things if it's someone who manages each process or owns the business or whatever it might be. So when you are planning the shoot, obviously if it's a wedding, all of that will be chosen, the locations and the whole sequence of events will be organised by the person who's running the wedding, and you kind of fit into that. But if you're running a shoot on your own with somebody, have a think about what locations you can use that would tell that person's story visually, or at least a part of their story. And then you can set up shots and again use rule of thirds, use the space in the frame to put those locations in, or anything else that you get inspired by. They might be holding something, if they, it might be a bit of a boat or whatever it might be. But hopefully you get the idea of that. Start thinking about how you can have that portrait be more than just the person's head and shoulders or whatever you're shooting. And again, this doesn't have to be the whole shoot. You can do a variety of different images. and different locations. But if you've got that choice of images, it does give your client, whether it's a paid client or something you're doing for a friend, or even to build up your own portfolio, it does allow you to show different takes on something that, if you say portrait, most people, I imagine, will be thinking of something like a head and shoulders shot. So you can do something a little bit more out of the ordinary. And then the final thing is looking at what is the end result and what do you need to do at the editing stage. So so this might be on individual images. Are they better in black and white? Do you want them colored? Do you want them edited in a particular way? Do you want, quite a saturated look? Do you want them quite desaturated? Is another way of handling them. How do you edit them? So have a think about that side of things, if any of that is important. Particularly with color and black and white, because as soon as you switch to black and white, you're looking at shapes and textures. And something to be conscious of, if you get to see the client, is if they don't have good skin. And I know this is a personal thing to say, but just be conscious that if you switch to black and white, you might have to be very careful with how you set your contrast, because if someone doesn't have good skin, as in there's lots of dents and whatnot in it, or they're very freckly, all these kind of things, they can be emphasized if you don't handle the editing very well, and you could end up with something that they don't feel is particularly flattering, let's put it that way. Okay, and then the final thing is, as I've said, what do you, if you're producing something like a photo book, have a think about how that book will work. So going back to a wedding as an example, that can be a sequential series of images, starting with people arriving at the venue where the ceremony is taking place, and then you'll move on to the next stage of the event, and that might involve moving to a different location. So think about what are referred to as linking photos. So these might be people getting into cars and then arriving at a venue somewhere else, or a picture of the venue. So you can put these little linking pictures to visually show in the story that you've changed location, or where the location is. You can create that setting, that location, that environment where the next stage of the story is happening. If you're doing a portrait shoot, if you're doing a family shoot, you might want to have mum and dad in a section together. You might want to have the kids on their own. Kids playing is a great one. And you really need to, if you want to work with children, it's good to be able to build rapport with them, get them to do things, get them to do activities they like, because the problem with kids is that they don't have a long attention span. If you're trying to get them to pose, you've really got to be fast. So that would be just something else to think about. And when I was shooting portraits, I have a 28-300 zoom lens. So that takes me from wide angle right the way through to telephoto. And that was ideal for doing group shots with children, because what that allowed me to do was have everybody set together, and I'd take my shots and using the rule of triangles and all these kind of things to get the composition right, which is subject for another day. But if I saw something interesting, like a child pulling a face, or, two people looking at one another, I could just zoom straight in and grab that shot without having to change cameras or change lenses or whatever else. Because if you've got to change the equipment, when something like that happens, you're definitely going to miss it. I pretty much guarantee that, because these things tend to be a bit spontaneous. And although you can set situations up, there are things you can do, for example, to get a couple to kiss. There are things you can do to get that to happen. And in which case, you know what you're doing and you'll be ready for that. But you've really got to be alert and ready to grab anything that happens during the shoot that can just add another dimension. It's just, spontaneous. I love spontaneous photographs because, again, it comes back to showing the character of those people and maybe how they relate to one another as well. So hopefully it's a loving look. It might be one child beating another one. I don't know. I'm just throwing this in here. But hopefully you get the idea. So I guess recapping on this stuff, the first thing is to just remember that for a lot of people, having their photograph taken is not one of the more pleasurable experiences that they have. So it is really important to be able to build rapport with people. And I'd say this is probably the most important aspect of portrait photography. It's being able to build rapport, get people to relax with you so that they look relaxed in the photographs, even if they're not. So part of that will be guiding them. I would always show them what I wanted. So I'd always turn up in jeans, regardless of if it was a portrait shoot, because a lot of the time I'd end up on the ground. So particularly with children, I would get down really low. So if there was a baby on a rug in the garden, I'd be down on my belly on the grass, getting eye to eye sort of shot with that child. So, and I would always show people what I how I wanted them to pose. So, again, if you're not sure about how you want them to pose, you really need to get clear on that, because it gives you a starting point, and you can always get them to do something different, move to the left, move to the right, turn their head to the right, look here, look there, all of this kind of stuff. You need to guide them. And this is where that shoot list comes in. So I had 2 shoot lists, one for more the kind of wedding event type thing. The other one was my portrait shoot list, and that was a full family list. So obviously if I wasn't shooting a family, I wouldn't need to use all of it. But it just gave me a reference, because I think particularly if you're new to portrait photography, once you're there, it can be quite stressful for you, and you need your clients to be relaxed. Otherwise, it will come through in the photographs. So the more you can do to make it easy for you and to help you to relax, the better. So that when it comes to actually taking the photographs, you've got a checklist there that will just guide you through the first few shots. And then you'll relax. I think with most of these kind of things, once you've got into it, you'll begin to relax and you'll get much better results. So again, as a tip, do the more formal photographs first, because if people look a little bit tense and formal, that's probably okay. But if you are going to do some informal stuff, which might involve a change of clothing, then just get them to do the formals first, then do the more relaxed stuff, because by then, hopefully they got used to you. You're feeling more relaxed. They're more comfortable with where it's all going. If you get some good photographs as you're shooting, I mean, with the great thing with digital, I would show them just to show that things are happening and they are getting some good results. I wouldn't show them everything, but if you got 1 or 2 poses that you really like, that you think have come out very well and are what the client wants, then I would show them those, because that will help them, I guess, build their confidence in you, that you know what you're doing, and they are going to finish up with a really good set of images, the kind of thing that they wanted or had in mind when they asked you to do the shoot in the first place. So being able to connect with people is really important. Some people are naturally good at it. Some people find it more difficult. So if you're one of the latter, I do recommend you spend a bit of time just working on that aspect. And one part of it will be to just get really comfortable with what you're doing yourself and really get to know, have a few poses, 3 or 4 maybe, that you can show people how to do them, and just have a clear shoot list of what you want for, let's say, the first dozen images that you're going to shoot. The next thing I think probably is to think about how the images are going to be used, so jumping right to the other end of the process, because then you can kind of work back, and that will tell you what equipment you need, if you need anybody to ideally help you. If you don't have someone you can ask to just go around with a smartphone or another camera for you, then maybe you want other people who are actually in the shoot to do the smartphone shots for you and just upload them, give them a link, even with something with a QR code, if it's printed, just so they can scan it and go to it, or drop an email that can be sent out to everybody with a direct link. However you need to do that to make it as easy as possible for people to share what they've got, so that becomes part of the final collection of images. So remember, if it is a photo book, depending on the quality and the size, you can get away with relatively low definition images. If you're using, I've used different photo book printers, I did like Blurb, although they're quite expensive, because they give you, there is some software you can download from them, which helps you in creating the photo book. And one of the things I liked about it was that it gives you different page layouts you can use, but once you put an image on there, it will tell you as you make it bigger or smaller. It will tell you, particularly if it's bigger, it will tell you if the photograph you're using has enough resolution to be printed at that size. So that's really helpful. So again, if in any doubt, just shoot raw and shoot big. And you can always make things smaller. You can always switch to JPEGs. And in fact, one of the advantages is when you come to the editing side, you can just crop maybe a small section of the image, or completely reformat the image. So you might have shot it in a landscape format, but you might decide there are some interesting portrait format parts of that photograph that you can just crop out, and that they make a really good photograph on their own. So it just gives you more flexibility in how you produce the final result. But do think about that. If it is a book, think about how that book will come together. Is it going to be a series of chapters in whatever form? Is it telling a story of the day? So does it need to be in chronological order? Can it be by subject order? Do you need to think about link photographs to take you from one chapter to the next? But just think about it. And again, have a look online for examples if you're feeling a bit stumped. Okay, so I hope that's useful. Obviously, I think portraits is one of those subjects that I would find it quite easy to talk about for quite a while, actually, and because there are many aspects to portrait photography of whatever form. That once you start diving in, you realize there are more and more questions to be asked. But hopefully, if that is something that you're thinking of doing or you're getting back into, hopefully there are some new ideas there, and hopefully you'll be able to produce some really good results. So thanks for your time again, and I will speak to you on the next podcast. By the way, if you like the podcast, please think about supporting me, and there's probably a little message following this, but that does help me to carry on doing what I'm doing if you find this sort of thing valuable. Okay, so bye for now. Oh, and one thing just before you go, please take a look at the 2026 wildlife calendar. That's available now. It's on the website. There's a link below the description of this podcast episode, so please take a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.